Do you like travel and history? In this video we use a blend of the latest technology, drone footage, expert advice and archival material to explore the top 5 must-see American battlefield sites of the First World War. We'll cover both famous and less well-known locations across the whole Western Front, so be sure to stick around. Arriving on the Western Front, which ran some 400 miles through France and Belgium from 1917 onwards, American forces saw some of the fiercest fighting of the entire war, with the Doughboys, as they became affectionately known, losing more than 110,000 servicemen during that time. Today, most of the former battlefields have returned to agriculture, but some locations have been preserved, and for you as a visitor to the region, a trip to some of those sites offers an incredible experience. So let's get straight into our choice for the top 5 must-see locations. At number 5 we have the hilltop stronghold of Montfaucon d'Argonne. Located on the edge of the famous Meuse-Argonne battlefield some 150 miles east of Paris and 20 miles northwest of Verdun. This formidable German complex, formed of heavily fortified concrete emplacements around an ancient church, was attacked on the 26th of September 1918. Leading that assault were men of the US 79th and 37th Divisions, who despite heroic efforts were unable to capture the hill. The following day, the German positions were finally captured at the point of the bayonet by the men of the 79th, systematically working from bunker to bunker in brutal hand-to-hand fighting. Today, the hill at Montfaucon is one of the most fascinating preserved sites along the Western Front, dominated by the 200-foot memorial to the Doughboys who fought and fell here. It is still surrounded by the old German pillboxes and ruins of the ancient church, which can be explored by any battlefield visitor. From the top of the tower, most of the Meuse-Argonne battlefield can be seen as a reward for the visitor who climbs the not inconsiderable 234 steps to its purpose-built observation platform. The main site itself is today maintained by the American Battle Monuments Commission, and although not that well visited compared to other locations, it's a real hidden gem of the Western Front and well worth a visit. Coming in at number 4 is the Bellicourt Tunnel System and Somme American Cemetery at Bonny. Located some 50 miles east of the city of Amiens in the French Picardy region is the infamous Somme sector of the Western Front. It was also in September 1918 that 2 US divisions alongside Australian and British troops played a key role in breaking the formidable Hindenburg Line, an achievement which laid the groundwork for the end of the First World War. The main German defences at that time were formed on the Saint-Quentin Canal, a large canal system with very steep sides on which the Germans had anchored their last serious hopes of holding the Allied advance. The exception to this canal was the Bellicourt Tunnel. Created 100 years before and opened by Napoleon himself, it formed an overland passage of several miles across which the 27th New York and the 30th Old Hickory divisions assaulted on the 29th of September. It was a very bloody attack, with one of the assaulting American units suffering the highest casualty rates of any US regiment in the entire First World War. By the end of the day, the tunnel and the Hindenburg Line itself had been breached, but at massive cost to the attackers. The German army, though, would never truly recover and began a withdrawal which would only end with the armistice on the 11th of November 1918. Today, the capture of the Bellicourt Tunnel is not well known, but the battlefield still retains lots of history, with much of the ground unchanged for a century. The canal system, the tunnel itself, is still in operation, complete with First World War pillboxes and observation posts. Close to the spot where the Doughboys fought is the impressive Bellicourt Monument, and near to the modern Canal Museum is a smaller memorial to the men of Tennessee who took part in the assault. Less than a mile down the road is another iconic spot from the actions of that day, the Riqueval Bridge. It was here where men of the British 46th Division, attacking alongside the Americans, stormed and captured another vital canal crossing point. They posed for a famous photo shortly afterwards. You can still visit that overgrown spot today to recreate that iconic photograph. And just a few miles away from the Bellicourt Tunnel is the village of Bonny and the stunning Somme American Cemetery, containing the graves of 1,844 fallen Americans of the Great War, including that of First Lieutenant William Fitzsimmons, the first American officer killed on the Western Front in the First World War. Number 3 on our list is the famous US Army and Marine Corps battlefield at Belleau Wood. Only about 60 miles northeast of Paris, this battle is perhaps the best known by name, at least on our list, and it actually covers a very wide area, with the wood itself being the centrepiece of the fighting in June of 1918. Becoming part of US Marine Corps legend since that date, Belleau was famed, probably incorrectly as it happens, as the inspiration for the German term Teufelhunde, or devil dogs, reportedly used to describe corpsmen during the battle. At Belleau, both USMC and US Army personnel fought shoulder to shoulder with French forces to drive the Germans from well-sighted and heavily defended positions. Amongst the most bitter fighting of all was the struggle for the wood itself. Crisscrossed with German trenches and machine gun emplacements, Marine Corps battalions launched repeated attacks across the infamous wheat fields into the southwest edge of the wood before finally gaining and maintaining a foothold. The fighting around Belleau and the heights to its north would go on for weeks and cost thousands of lives, but the ground would eventually be captured and held by US forces. Today, the area has mostly returned to nature, though if you know where to look, there are still glimpses of what once happened here. The woods south of Belleau proper are still full of shrapnel and unexploded ammunition, which of course should never be touched. All of it fired during the battle, and the undergrowth is still pitted with shell holes, making a visit to this little-known spot a powerful, if a little spooky, experience. The famous wheat fields attacked by the Marines at the outset of the battle can clearly be found and easily visited, as can Belleau Wood itself. Inside the wood are the remains of German weapons captured during the fighting, various memorials to US units who fought here, and battle-damaged remnants of a hunting lodge which was a focal point during the fighting. All across the wood, trenches can still be seen etched into the landscape, and the impressive crescent-shaped Ain Marne Cemetery and Visitor Centre is undoubtedly a must-see for any visitor to the area. Of particular note, amongst the 2,289 burials is the grave of Lieutenant Whedon Osborne, a US Army dentist who posthumously earned the Medal of Honor for bringing in many wounded under heavy fire whilst attached to the Marines at Belleau Wood, an action which will cost him his life. Also worth a stop for any battlefield visitor is the nearby German cemetery at Belleau, which offers a fascinating contrast to the US. Just a few hundred metres north of the wood, many of those buried there were the defenders during the battle, who of course also gave up their lives in the fighting. Second on our list is perhaps one of the most stunning sights to be seen anywhere on the Western Front, the Butte de Vauquois. Now, whilst this isn't a well-known American battle like the others here on the list, it's very much linked to the American story of World War I, and the site itself is simply spectacular, making it a true must-see location. Before the outbreak of the war, the small village of Vauquois, set on top of a hill or a butte, had a population of some 160 or so, with the small village containing a church, school, cafe and various other buildings, all set into a picturesque landscape. All that changed in 1914 when the fighting stabilised in the area and the high ground of the Butte de Vauquois became a key objective for French and German troops alike. Over the next 3 years, some of the most horrific fighting of the entire First World War took place in an area no bigger than a football pitch. Fighting both above and below ground, and with trenches just a few metres apart, the village of Vauquois was quite literally erased from the map. Huge underground mines and above-ground artillery utterly shattered the landscape, scarring it to this very day. All told, more than 13,000 men fell in this small patch of ground. The Butte was finally captured by men of the US 35th Infantry Division from Kansas and Missouri in September 1918, who surrounded the hill and the few remaining Germans who occupied this shattered landscape. Today, the Butte de Vauquois is uniquely preserved. A visitor will find trenches, machine gun emplacements, barbed wire and miles of tunnels still dug into the hillside. The short trip across no man's land, once so deadly, can now be made in a matter of seconds, and the entire site is literally full of history at every turn. For those following the story of US forces in the area, a trip to the Pennsylvania Memorial in the town of Varennes-en-Argonne is also well worth a visit. Commemorating the men of the US 28th Division who liberated the town, it overlooks the route taken in the following weeks as the doughboys forced the Germans from their positions around Verdun. And finally, coming in at number 1 on our must-see US locations on the Western Front is the Meuse-Argonne Military Cemetery at Romagny-sur-Montfaucon. About 150 miles northeast of Paris, this incredible site is quite simply the largest US military cemetery in Europe, with more than 14,000 US servicemen resting within the 130-acre site. Much less visited than other locations such as Normandy American Cemetery at Omaha Beach. This cemetery, like all American Battle Monuments Commission sites, is immaculately kept by a team of gardeners, and truly is a must-see for any visitor to the Western Front. Amongst those to be buried here in the 8 major plots are residents of all 50 states, 9 Medal of Honor recipients, 18 sets of brothers, 7 female nurses, a Major League Baseball player, and most importantly, thousands of ordinary Americans who quite simply gave all that they could, their lives, and who remain to this day on the same ground they fell liberating over a century ago. Visitors here can get a guided tour of the site or experience the location at their own pace. Most of the fallen here are casualties of the Meuse-Argonne offensive and died within a few miles of the cemetery itself, and visits to the local area, now mostly returned to agriculture, often hold some fascinating history, and US battlefield visitors are still warmly welcomed by the local population. Be sure to stick around until 5 PM because each and every day the US flag at the cemetery is lowered and taps, the signal for lights out, traditionally heard at the end of a military day, is played. A powerful experience that shouldn't be missed. So that brings us to the end of our top 5 must-see locations for US visitors to the old Western Front. Of course, these are just our suggestions. There are plenty of other incredible sites to see, and we'd love to hear from you, so let us know in the comments where you would like to recommend for US visitors. We hope you found our video interesting and get a chance to make a journey to Europe, but of course we understand it's not always that easy. If you'd like to know more about these amazing locations, but Europe is out of reach, why not head over to battleguide.co.uk, where we have a whole series of immersive virtual tours led by global expert historians covering each of these key sites and many other famous battlefields from throughout history. That's all this time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.